Boom! We are live, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Welcome to the Nolan Hawkeye Anthony YouTube channel. And I thank all of you for being here, wherever you may be. And of course, however you may be listening. In today's video, I wanted to quickly discuss where things stand for the Iowa Hawkeyes football team and their 2025 recruiting class, particularly with regards to in-state recruiting. If I had done this video, well, maybe that's not necessarily the case, but I was going to say if I had done this video a few months ago and had things happened the way they had with Thomas Meyer committing to the Iowa Hawkeyes, really what I'm referring to is if Iowa still had the commitment of offensive tackle Nick Brooks, things would be looking 10 times better. But as it stands now, Nick Brooks did decommit from the Iowa Hawkeyes. And to tell you the truth, I don't think it's really known hardly at all where things stand with him. I mean, on 3, he is still favored to land at Iowa pretty significantly. I don't know if the Caden Proctor commitment changed things. I don't think that that's it. From what I have read, what happened is he took a visit to Texas Tech. And here's the thing. The Iowa Hawkeyes message when it comes to recruiting, years ago, it used to be so stingy that if you committed to the Iowa Hawkeyes, the staff said, we want you to be so solid in your commitment that if you commit, we're going to believe that you're super solid, and therefore we're not okay with you visiting other schools. And this all came to a head with the recruiting class that would have had Eno Benjamin, a 4-star running back out of the state of Texas. In that recruiting class, Iowa had done miraculously in the state of Texas. Now, of course, the guys who committed and then decommitted did end up having varying degrees of success in college. One of them, really, what had happened was Eno Benjamin was a tremendous recruit on the recruiting trail, or recruiter on the recruiting trail, particularly in the state of Texas. And he had convinced a bunch of, or a few high-level, high 3-star prospects to commit to Iowa to come play with him. One of them was wide receiver Bo something. I forget what his name is. I could find it easily enough. Let me just type in Eno Benjamin here, and I'll be able to find him. But the reason why I share that story is because after that, the Iowa Hawkeyes coaching staff went to the drawing board and essentially rethought out their strategy on whether commits should be able to visit other schools and things like that. And they became much more open to that. Now, they still do hold firm to the idea that if you are going to commit to us, we want you to be pretty steadfast and pretty solid in your commitment to us. In other words, we want you to be so sold on our program that by the time you commit, we have essentially checked every box for you. But they are okay now with recruits visiting other schools, especially if they are talented enough and high enough of a recruit to do so. So the recruiting class was the 2020 recruiting class. It seems like yesterday that this was the recruiting class, and it still ended up being a decent recruiting class as far as rankings go. Not obviously not the best. but Iowa still did land some decent players, a lot of contributors in this class. You know, I mean, let's just go on the list. AJ Epinesa was a multi-year contributor for the Iowa Hawkeyes, eventually making it to the NFL. Tristan Wirfs was a day one starter on the offensive line, eventually making it to the NFL. One of the best offensive tackles in the NFL. Mark Kellenberger had some success, and I think he ended up sliding into the guard position. But I believe, if I remember correctly, he ended up retiring from football. Jaimin Colbert had some success early on, and then he ended up retiring from football as well. Brandon Smith, Matt Hankins, who's in the NFL. He is on he's kind of more practice squad territory. Ivory Kelly Martin gave some solid production to the Iowa Hawkeyes. Geno Stone went to the NFL. Let's see. Amir Smith-Marset made it to the NFL. Ryan Gersonde ended up helping the Iowa Hawkeyes a little bit. I think Iowa ended up landing the Australian punter that supplanted Ryan Gersonde. But so this class ended up being okay, but this was the class that really changed everything. And let's go to the offers here. So obviously their top running back was Eno Benjamin, who was committed and then decommitted after Iowa had basically given him a super hard time about his visiting other schools. And the thing is, guys, is that traditionally speaking, I would agree with the coaching staff's viewpoint of what happened. And yeah, they should want to be completely sold. If you commit to a school, why would you want to visit anybody else? Logically, if you commit to a school, logically speaking, you are sold that is the best school for you. But of course, it's not always that simple. There is some gray area here. And especially nowadays, with the situation being more akin to professionalism and the malleability of professionalism, being able to be very mobile in your decisions and where you play and what you do, a lot more power has gotten into the hands of recruits than ever before. I mean, they've always had a lot of power, but it's far more now than it ever has been. And you just can't do that anymore. You cannot have any strings attached as a recruiting staff because players can leave in the blink of an eye. You have to be very soft on your approach when it comes to recruits, especially recruits that have a decent amount of offers. So Iowa obviously had missed on Oliver Martin. He went to Michigan, eventually circling back to Iowa and then transferring to Nebraska after he did not get the playing time that he wanted. Gavin Holmes was another wide receiver that Iowa had landed, high 3-star out of the state of Texas. He ended up decommitting and committing to Baylor. And he actually did have some success in college. He got injured quite a few times. Obviously, they got Brandon Smith. They got Amir Smith-Marset late in the process. And here's the thing, guys. In the end, it all worked out because Amir Smith-Marset and Brandon Smith ended up being two of the most productive wide receivers that Iowa has had in the last 10 years. Okay. They were pretty much from their freshman year on contributors at the wide receiver position. And the X and the Y were, it's exactly what the Hawkeyes wanted. They wanted a big body wide receiver in Brandon Smith, and they wanted a speedster, and they got that in Amir Smith-Marset. They pretty much had exactly what they wanted in those two wide receivers from the moment they stepped onto campus, minus maybe year one. So it all worked out for Iowa. And who knows, had Iowa kept the commitments of Gavin Holmes and Bo Corrales, would they have landed Amir Smith-Marset? Who knows? Who knows? Probably not, because they wouldn't have had a scholarship spot for him. But actually, you know what? Maybe they would have, because they wouldn't have, had they had the commitments from them, they wouldn't have needed to go for more lower tier, mid-major project prospects in Max Cooper and Henry Marquise. But, nonetheless, it worked out. This was the other commitment that Iowa had in Bo Corrales. He had varying degrees of success at North Carolina before transferring back to Texas State. So, anyways, I just wanted to take a trip down memory lane there. And bringing this back to Nick Brooks decided to take a visit to Texas Tech after his commitment to Iowa. And it was a good enough visit that it made him rethink things. And I guarantee what happened is Texas Tech was able to share their monetary plan with Nick Brooks, and it made him rethink what he could get out on the open market vis-a-vis him being a prospect. And I get it. I do. I mean, all of us in our professional lives want to make as much money as possible. It's not the only aspect of the decision that goes into our decision regarding our careers and things like that, but it's certainly a big part of it. And every individual has more importance placed on various aspects of the decision, and that differs from person to person. But by and large, there's a few main categories that determine the outcome of your decision. Money being one, how much money you can get, the culture, the system, the happiness or enjoyment of being at a particular place versus it not being a fun place to go to work every single day. And so I guarantee, though, that with Nick Brooks, what Texas Tech was able to promise him or lay out to him made him rethink things. So, where do things stand with Iowa and in-state recruiting? Well, here are the commitments that Iowa has. Like I said, they did have the commitment of Nick Brooks. I think they are still very much in play for his commitment, but it's certainly not a slam dunk guarantee that he is going to choose to play for the Iowa Hawkeyes. Iowa has a good core of commitments at this point. They have two highly rated linebackers in Blake Goucher and Carson Cooney, who On3 Sports recruiting website has Carson Cooney as Iowa's highest rated recruit. He has a 91 4-star grade, and he's a top 200 recruit, according to On3, one of the top 20 linebackers, or I believe top 15, actually, linebackers in the entire country. Blake Goucher is a 89. You know what? Let's just get it pulled up here, because it's important that you guys can see exactly what it is that I'm talking about. Iowa does have their quarterback commit early in the process in Jimmy Sullivan. I think when it's all said and done, he'll probably be graded as a 87 or an 88 when it's all said and done. Sometimes, especially at the quarterback position, when commits commit so early on in the process, and therefore they don't go to recruiting camps and these recruiting services don't get a chance to see them as much, it works against them in that they're not rated as high as they should be rated, just because they haven't been seen as much. But I at this point, with the existence of this YouTube channel, I know how it works enough after reviewing and monitoring these recruiting sites for so many years now. An 86 right now, this early in the process, is akin to being an 88 or an 89 by the time it's all said and done. Recruiting services bear in mind that recruits are a junior, or they're early on in their senior year, or they're at the end of their senior year. They do keep that in mind when giving them a grade. They're not going to be graded as high at the end of their junior year as they are at the end of their senior year, because logically speaking, they have improved by the time they've gotten to their senior campaign. So here's a few visits that Iowa has lined up coming up. They have pretty highly ranked Blue Valley Northwest out of Kansas, which Iowa has done pretty well at landing Gavin Hoffman, one of the highest rated tight ends Iowa has received in a few years now. Last recruiting class. And of course, Mason Richman, who is a mainstay in the Iowa offensive line. We'll see if he can take a huge step forward this upcoming year. It'll be interesting to see with Caden Proctor now being on the Iowa Hawkeye roster. Of course, he is from Blue Valley Northwest as well. But these are the commitments according to On3 here. They have Iowa as the 25th ranked class. Thomas Meyer is the highest rated composite recruit. Gosh, all of these websites have all of these pop-ups and ads, and it slows down the processing of the videos. But as you guys can see, the purely On3 rating, Carson Cooney from Oswego, Illinois, is the highest rated recruit. 91, 17th at the linebacker position, 170th overall, and 6th in the state of Illinois. Iowa continues to be dominant in the state of Illinois. Burt Goucher, another linebacker, more of an inside linebacker, excuse me, Carson Cooney is more of the inside linebacker. Burke Goucher, more of a outside linebacker. They still have him as an athlete as opposed to graded as a linebacker. They have him as an 89. So very close to being a 4-star, and he is 9th in the state of Illinois. Joey Van Wetzinga, whose brother was on the Iowa Hawkeyes, they have graded him an 89 as well, up from the 86 that he once had, now that they have graded him purely as an interior offensive lineman. And then, of course, Jimmy Sullivan is still an 86. So how is Iowa doing in the state of Iowa? Well, it's kind of a mixed bag. Iowa not landing the commitment of quarterback Alex Manx, I can look past, because, I've said this in the past, that the way Iowa goes about recruiting is they view players at each one of the positions. And for example, the quarterback position, okay, if ultimately they viewed Alex Manx and Jimmy Sullivan in a similar light, more or less, okay, what it's going to come down to for Iowa in designating recruiting resources is, who do they think they have a better chance of landing? And in this circumstance, they thought that Jimmy Sullivan would be the more attainable prospect. Not that they couldn't land Alex Manx, but Jimmy Sullivan would be the more attainable. And they viewed him in a similar light to Alex Manx. Now, the recruiting services don't have them rated the same. They are much higher on Alex Manx currently than Jimmy Sullivan. Jimmy Sullivan has been a late riser. But I can look past the quarterback one, okay? And it looked like for a while that Alex Manx was going to land at Nebraska, ultimately choosing Iowa State. I can live with that one, okay? Iowa still does have 2 of the top 5 commitments, but they are not trending for defensive end Jack Limbaugh, who attends the same high school as Alex Manx. I think that in the end, it will be hard for Iowa to land him, especially if he is good friends with Alex Manx. Now that he is at Iowa State, and you guys can see here, he is definitely favored to go to Iowa State, which for a long time he was favored to go to Iowa. I think Iowa's got a uphill battle to land him. I don't know if they're even still heavily pursuing him. They may not be, as they have some other defensive linemen that they are really high on. And the thing is, this really isn't the end of the world. The defensive line is the position that Iowa has, one of the best positions Iowa has recruited in the last 4 years, especially the last 2-3 seasons. Year in, year out, the best positional group that Iowa has recruited has been the defensive line. I mean, we're talking high 3-star, 4-star recruits in each one of those recruiting classes. And that's the reason why each of the past few years, Iowa has had one of the best defensive lines and deepest defensive lines in the entire country. Definitely in the Big Ten, is because Kelvin Bell has been able to recruit and stock that position full of really talented prospects. So it's not the end all be all, but still, I mean, if you're if we're just taking Iowa at their word, which is that they want to recruit the state of Iowa really, really well, then presumably they want to land each and every one of these top prospects in the state of Iowa. Okay. And they do have an offer out to Jack Limbaugh. So we'll see what happens with that. I don't think where things stand now, they're going to land him, but it is what it is. Xavion Robinson out of Valley West Des Moines High School. I don't think Iowa is going to land him either. He is currently favored by 247 Sports, including Sean Bach, including David Eicholt, to go to Iowa State. So that would give Iowa State minimum 2 of the top 8 players, or well, let's just go 7. No, we can go 8. 2 of the top 8 players in the state and 2 of the top 6 according to On3. Now, Iowa already has 2 of the top 5 in Thomas Meyer and Joey Van Wetzinga, but by the end of March, Iowa State could have 3 of the top 6. And that would really leave it down to Iowa landing Nick Brooks to basically have this as a wash year where it's not Iowa or Iowa State who is dominant in the state of Iowa. And I will say I'm kind of surprised that Iowa has not been more dominant this year in the state of Iowa, considering they beat Iowa State head to head. And secondly, they're coming off of a Big Ten championship appearance and a 10-win season. But, you know, it is what it is. Now, just because Iowa doesn't do overly good in the state of Iowa does not mean that this won't be a good recruiting class. Quite the opposite. I mean, Iowa already has a strong start to their 2025 recruiting class in the 5 commitments that they already do have. But, you know, usually in-state success does correlate to Iowa's overall recruiting ranking success. I think the key to Iowa's recruiting class will be whether Iowa lands legacy recruit IOC Epinesa. Now, he is favored by On3 to go to Iowa. And to tell you the truth, thankfully, it's at one of the positions that Iowa is the best at, which is the defensive line. And overall, one of the best units in the country being the defensive side of the football. But, you know, they're still going to have some heavy hitters in on OC. It's either IOC or Lose Epinesa. I don't know exactly how to say it, but either way, Iowa is going to have some heavy competition to land him. And I think whether they land him or not will be the difference between Iowa. Him and Nick Brooks will be the difference between Iowa having a top 30 recruiting class and having more of a top 40 recruiting class. So that's pretty much where things stand, guys. Overall, I would say Iowa is doing good. with the 5 commitments they have. They're not doing as well in the state of Iowa as I would have hoped, but they're not doing poor either. It's not like they haven't landed any of them. I mean, Iowa landing tight end Thomas Meyer, especially when Iowa State was in after him hard, is good, but I think that the other 2 prospects, and Iowa still may land Mason Woods. I think a lot of that is going to depend on LeVar Woods and whether he's happy at Iowa. We know that he took an interview for an NFL job. Seth Wallace did get the pay raise and was named interim. He was given the title of co-defensive coordinator or co-head coach or whatever it was. Here, let's see. Maybe I can pull him up here. But, and, LeVar Woods was definitely trying to test his sexiness on the market, as far as him as a head coach overall. But Mason Woods, I don't think is a lock to go to Iowa per se. And that's what I've heard from 247 Sports as well. But, Iowa has as good a chance to land him as anybody else. So we'll see. We'll see. And the thing is, guys, is there's always more recruits. If any of the past 3 years are examples of this, there are always more recruits that present themselves and are uncovered as the year goes on. Okay. We are still very, very early in the process. There's going to be other in-state recruits that emerge, and we'll see. Just because the rankings are what they are now doesn't mean that they won't change a year from now. They'll be similar. Okay. They usually don't change wildly or drastically, but they could still change nonetheless. Okay. Thomas Meyer could become the top in-state recruit overwhelmingly. Jack Limbaugh could become a 4-star interior offensive lineman, becoming, top 3 minimum in the state of Iowa. So, it just depends. But so Seth Wallace is assistant defensive coordinator. So, we'll see. Just my closing thoughts here is where things stand in Iowa's recruiting class overall. Iowa is doing just fine. They have 5 recruits. They still have some big names on the board. More recruits are going to present themselves as we progress and more camps happen and we get towards summer. I mean, we are still so early in the process. I mean, we haven't even had the major official visit weekend yet. So, but that is where things stand now, guys. Be sure to like, comment, share, subscribe. And last but not least, DBAP, don't be a pussy willow on facts or feelings, because your feelings just don't matter. Love you guys. See you guys next time. Go Hawks. Bye-bye.